You're listening to Spurscast, episode 600. My name is Paul Garcia, and I'm your host here on the Spurscast. Today, I'll be joined by Project Spurs founder Michael DeLeon. In this episode, Mike and I will discuss the Spurs and their return from quarantine, multiple players still being out, and the second half of their schedule being released. However, before we get started, Mike, this is episode 600 of the Spurscast. Can you please take the listeners through, just pretty much like the story of how this podcast came into being and how, what are your thoughts on it going all the way now to episode 600?
Yeah, I'm not sure when I started this, I envisioned 600. It was just one of those things that I kind of started. What happened is that I used to watch a cable channel called Tech TV. I love technology, and like they killed that channel, but then a lot of the hosts got together and started doing getting together, and they would have a mixer and a mic, and they'd go into different places and they try to record, and then it was okay, so this technology podcast that just started. And I was like, well, that's really cool. Basically all they're doing was recording it and putting it online and then just posting about it. And we had WordPress, because when we started the website, WordPress really wasn't a thing yet, but at the time we had WordPress. I was like, okay, well, that's one part of the thing. And then I had, for a class, I had this super cheap, terrible mic, which if you ever listen to any of the old episodes, it sounded like I was calling it from a payphone or something. I was like, okay, I'll try that, and there's some free software. And so I recorded the first one, and it was just kind of fun. I was like, okay, this would be a different thing. It'll be a way to provide some audio content and kind of a way to jump in on this bleeding edge stuff. This was before Apple and iTunes made their changes, before podcasting had become a thing. So it was pretty exciting at the time. There was probably not very many podcasts, and it was just major mainstream people were on it. And so that's kind of how it started. And then at the time for Project Spurs, there was a girl, her name was Melissa Martinez, and she was writing, and I was like, you want to come try it sometime? We can do it on Skype, and I'll record it to my mixer, and I bought a mixer by then and stuff, and so she did it. And then Jeff Garcia, who does Lockdown Spurs now, and who was with us for quite a while, I kind of put a call out for I realized early on that I needed a co-host. I was like, in order for this to be anything and for me not to bore people and me just be terrible, I was like, I really need a co-host. So I put something on Craigslist, and he answered it, and he was interested in writing. And I was like, well, how about doing the podcast with me? And so it was he and I for the longest time. We had other people join us from time to time. And then, we were doing live shows when that was still kind of early on, and it just became something that was really fun, and we had a lot of fun with it. But then schedules got busy, and then so it came time. So I was like, okay, it's time to start turning it over. And I remember at one time, Jeff and I would do a week, and then the next week it would be, I think, you and Kyle Bainitz.
Yeah, I remember Kyle Bainitz. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then Kyle ended up hosting for a little while, and then I know Jose Grijalva and Aaron Prine did a really good job, and then Ryan McCallum came in and did a job. We just, at one point, it was time for another change, and so you were interested in that, and so we transitioned over to you hosting, and then since then you've been bringing on kind of a different person from the staff each week, and it's just been crazy to see it, and as far as it's gotten, and what was it, last year, the year before? I think you won an award for the San Antonio magazine. It was editor's choice or best podcast or something like that. And it was so it's been really cool to see to be a part of that and then started that journey and just see it grow from there. So it's a long story, but it's been really fun, and I can't see us stopping anytime soon. It's just so much fun, and it's just a different thing, it's its own thing now, it seems like, and we still have it as obviously as part of Project Spurs and everything, but it's just something that's kind of separate on its own. It kind of you can kind of go in different directions and stuff with it that we can't always go into detail on the site and stuff like that on certain things.
Yeah, and the thing that really strikes me is just how early on y'all thought about doing this. I mean, considering, like you said, like podcasts didn't really get popular till a little bit later than that. And if you can recall, do you remember what season it was, what Spurs year it was when you guys first launched?
Okay, so I remember when I was... It was 2005. It was the championship when they won the Pistons from there in that playoff series is when I started when they were in the playoffs that year that they won their second championship, I guess. And then I remember doing a podcast with the person I told you about, Melissa, after they won the championship that year. So yeah, it was a while back.
Yeah, no, that's again, that's pretty wild that it's that far back in 2005 that first, not the first, but one of the Spurs championships. Anyway, and then for me, when I knew this episode was coming up 600, I was like, okay, I've only done this for like 50 episodes. I felt like it doesn't feel like I've been doing it that long. But then, man, so then I went back to like 550, and I'm like, wait a minute, nope, Paul Garcia is still the host. And then I went back to 500. Wait a minute, Paul Garcia is still the host. I had to go all the way back to 459. I could not believe that I started doing this on episode 459. So as of today, this is 141 episodes I've done already. And like you mentioned, Mike, I've only when I have to, it's an emergency. I do have to go solo every now and then, which is very rare. But you're right. It's so much better to have a guest on and even have multiple guests. I know that in the off season we like to experiment that way and have like 3 or 4 guests, people on the episode just to have a little bit more fun. But we do want to keep it really concise during the season just to make sure we get to the episode. So yeah, so again, this is episode 600 that we're about to record here. Spurscast listeners, again, thank you to Michael for first launching the Spurscast. Now it's available. I remember being a fan of it early on, and then also I was so happy whenever you guys would bring me on to be a guest. Early on when I first started writing with Project Spurs back in the day too. So let's go ahead and get right into episode 600 here. So Spurscast listeners, I know that we normally have a certain routine here at the Spurscast, but because of the awkwardness of this last whole week of what's been going on with the team, we're going to change up the format just a little bit. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to first dive into the latest news because there's a lot of different topics for the news with the Spurs. And then we'll just spend some time on that one game that they've played so far since I last recorded, which was against the Oklahoma City Thunder on Wednesday. So let's first begin with some news on the players. So last week when I recorded, we knew that the Spurs were in quarantine. They had to have 4 games postponed, but we did not know who the players were. So now we've actually got some more details on the players and their situation. So the NBA did announce that 5 Spurs players are out due to health and safety protocols, and we know that they also had some positive tests. So that those players are, and they're actually some of these players are their normal rotation players. So you have Rudy Gay, Keldon Johnson, Devin Vassell, and Derek White, and then also Quindary Weatherspoon, which we knew Quindary was one of the players because he was the first player to get to have to sit out a game for the Spurs due to quarantine protocols about 2 weeks ago when they were playing. I think it goes against Atlanta after that Atlanta game. Now, from the latest news, Mike and I are recording this on a Friday evening, so the Spurs have put out their injury report for their game Saturday against the Pelicans, and they did say that Weatherspoon is going to be out on Saturday, but he's only out due to a coach's decision, and the reason why is for reconditioning because it's called post-health and safety protocols for Weatherspoon. Now, DeMar DeRozan also missed Wednesday's Spurs game against the Thunder, and that was for a different reason. He's not in quarantine because of safety protocols, but we talked about his situation a week ago where his father had just passed away when we last recorded, so that was some unfortunate news for DeMar and his family. But now it looks like DeMar might be returning on Saturday. The Spurs are listing him as questionable to return on Saturday, so there's a chance DeMar could come back. And then some other news that we saw this past week, which I was not shocked by, but I was a little surprised was the fact that DeMar didn't get selected as an All-Star. And I know that last week we spent a lot of time talking about he had a really good chance of getting in, but the NBA the coaches didn't pick him, and neither did Adam Silver when the reserves were announced. And the reason why is because all those players got in that I thought at the guard rotation, but it was Zion that threw off my calculations. I didn't think that the coaches would pick one of the forwards, but instead they did give one guard that extra wild card spot and one forward. So that's actually what threw off my projections on why DeMar missed out here from what I could see. So Mike, I know that's a lot of information. What do you want to say about those players that are out and also DeMar returning soon?
Yeah, man, it's tough with the players because it's definitely changed things for the season. It's crazy how 4 games being postponed. It seemed like the season was off for like a month or something. It seemed like forever that it took them to come back. But obviously the most important thing is everybody comes back healthy. Quindary Weatherspoon is a guy that I feel like terrible for because he has not, he played so well in the bubble. to end last season, and he just really hasn't had a chance to get on the floor. And obviously, he's not in Orlando with Austin, and so he's just not being able to really do anything right now. As far as DeMar, and there's one of the things like I talked to you about. It's so hard, I think, now because there's so much talent, and it's just like somebody, no matter what, you're always going to have a group of players that either feel they're snubbed or people are going to say they're snubbed. And like I thought maybe he could have edged either Chris Paul or maybe Zion. I'm not, but then it's the thing is like who do you keep out? Like Chris Paul still has had really good numbers, and he's got Phoenix playing very well. New Orleans, their record's not so great, but then you also have Devin Booker, who didn't make it. You also have Brandon Ingram, Zion's teammate that didn't make it. That's having a good season, and so it's. I mean, look at the Eastern Conference. Like Trae Young wasn't part of that group. There was a bunch of really good players. So it's like it's one of those things where it's like it's become really hard to try to include everybody who actually deserves to be named, but then you can't. You have to. I guess you have to cap it at some point, right? I mean, you can't. If any year you're gonna like not send a whole bunch of players, it's probably the best year, not to send a lot of players. And maybe in the future, if they want to talk about increasing the amount of All-Stars, okay. But then again, it's like when do you cut it off? And there's still gonna be players who, are gonna be kept out. So it's a tough call.
Yeah, no, it is, and from my viewpoint, there was the one thing that really bothered me about him not getting selected was the fact that the Spurs were winning this year. They had a winning record. They were fifth in the Western Conference, and they weren't that many more games away from Phoenix, who has 2 All-Stars, or some of the other teams. And then my other issue is, so that's one part of it. I think that the Spurs were winning, and then the fact that some of these players that got in, they're not even on winning teams, and that always bothers me when you don't have a winning record on your team, and then you still get selected. Now I know the talent is just overwhelming for some of these players, but then I could also see the flip side of why DeRozan wasn't chosen. His stats don't quite pop off the page, and also this Spurs team we've talked about. They have like multiple players who average double figures. This is a really just like a complete unit this season. So that's why I feel like what do you call it? You can't just say it's just one player, because there are some nights when DeRozan has an off night and then DeJounte Murray turns it up, or Keldon Johnson. So I think that this is more of a collective effort, and in this case it does hurt the All-Star case for any of these players, just because they're such a team that puts a lot of players provide production, not just one sole player on the team. So yeah, so DeMar did miss did not get selected for the All-Star game. And then the other bit of news, Mike, that happened this week was LaMarcus Aldridge return. With the games canceled, or not canceled, but postponed for so long, Aldridge was able to recover from his hip injury, and he was actually able to play in this game against the Oklahoma City on Wednesday. The interesting part about that was that he came off the bench for the first time since early on in his career. He came off the bench with 11 points and 7 rebounds, and I thought it was more so for like a conditioning effort. Since he hasn't played in multiple weeks since the beginning of February. However, when you listen to his post game audio and his interview, it almost sounds like this might be something they're gonna try to stick with for a little bit more than one game. Now we were going to discuss that as our main question is what does this team look like with LaMarcus off the bench? But the Spurs have now listed him as questionable because he has a new injury, and that's a right wrist injury for soreness. So what do you want to say about Aldridge and his situation?
It's a tough call, but at some point I think you have to kind of be open to them moving things around, trying to see what fits better. I mean, obviously, I don't think Luka is the answer at starting at that position, because he's not ready for that. But he's not ready for that. But the thing with whenever say DeMar is out, it puts a lot of pressure on him to have to do a lot. And I feel like he almost prefers when he has somebody else that's carrying the load with him, and I kind of think maybe him being on the bench kind of can take some of that pressure off, and he'll still able to have 11.7 rebounds, which is, I feel like off the bench that's pretty good. I mean, that's probably about the average rebounds he gets even when he starts. If they can find something that works well, if they see chemistry, I know Jakob has worked well with some of the starters in the past, and if they feel like continuing to use like DeMar at the 4 and then start Jakob, and that just works better than, obviously that's something the money had to do, and except when he was still in his prime, and so it's. I think obviously every player is different and they're going to respond differently, but I didn't mind it. I mean, and so as long as it's trying something that might be for the better of a team, and then you have a second unit that can be strong with LaMarcus, that can obviously score, and then you've got Patty and a few others, then maybe that's better for the team.
Yeah, and I think that one thing we saw though in this, and again it's just one game that he came back for coming off the bench, was that he actually got 7 post ups in that game, and normally he only gets like 2 or 3 if he's lucky in a game when he's with the full team and he's in his normal starting role. So they really have decreased his post up opportunities. He really doesn't get a lot of possessions on offense unless he's doing those pick and pop threes or mid range jumpers. So because of that, like you mentioned, Mike, he got a lot more shots off. He got a lot more of the offense running through him off the second unit, and again maybe that's a better role for him. I think that if this is a long-term solution, or at least they're going to try it for multiple games, I think that it's because of what the team did when he was out. Their numbers across the board defensively just got better. Even DeMar DeRozan, where his on-off numbers when he's off the floor with LaMarcus, when he's on the floor with LaMarcus, his numbers were bad. But then for those games that LaMarcus was out, even DeMar's numbers look so much better. So I think that right now that the team where they left off prior to them, getting impacted by COVID, they were playing really well, and I really feel like maybe Coach Pop didn't want to mess that up, and so he wants to kind of keep this group going together when everybody gets healthy again and gets back to the team. So again, we'll see how long that stays in a part of the team with LaMarcus coming off the bench. But for now, like I said, if you listen to his interview, it doesn't sound like this was a one game thing. It sounds like this might be a multiple game new role for him. So yeah, we'll kind of just wait and see. And again, he could be out Saturday with that new wrist injury that just came about. And the last bit of news, Mike, is earlier this week that the NBA did release a schedule for the Spurs and all the other teams the second half of the schedule. And wow, the Spurs have a tough road ahead to finish off this year. According to one of our writers at Project Spurs, Josh Paredes, he put on Twitter that the Spurs actually have the 4th toughest strength of schedule. I believe it's in the league or else out west for sure. At 51.5% for their winning percentage for the opponents, and out of the top 11 teams out west that are chasing the playoffs, they have the toughest road. Is what his analysis shows there. Jordan Howenstein, one of the Spurs PR guys, he recently put out a tweet where he says that if the Spurs are going to have 40 games in 68 days for the second half of the season after All-Star break, and there's no consecutive days off. So I mean that's tough. It's like every other day there's a game where there's back-to-backs. And then Jeff McDonald reported that they have 7 back-to-back sets in this second half of the season, and we know that this is a team that struggles on the second night of back-to-backs. I believe they're 0-4 already. So I mean they have a very tough schedule ahead of them. What did you think about that schedule that came out?
Yeah, that's a rough one, because that this team, like you said, on back-to-backs, they've had a really tough time. Not only that, I don't know how they're going to make up those 4 games with the schedule that they have right now. 40 games in 68 days, and you're supposed to try to get four more games in there somehow. I don't even know if they're going to. I'm not sure if they're just going to have to go by win percentages or what, but that's a tough one to do. But yeah, it's definitely not an easy schedule, and I think they're like 6 right now in the West, and so it's not one of those things where they can coast to like a play-in or playoffs or anything like that. They're gonna have some tests, and I think coming up like Monday is one of the first ones. Brooklyn should be a tough matchup for them, but yeah, it's not easy for the second half. And I remember it's always been like the road trip was like the toughest part of the schedule, but the road trip pretty much is gone now. But still, the rest of the schedule is really hard. So yeah, I think we're gonna get to see a lot of what this team is made of, and then I think we're gonna get to see, one thing that could be kind of exciting is you'll get to see some of their depth and see some of the younger guys on back-to-backs and things like that. We recorded the Forever Toros podcast earlier today, and we were talking about Keeler Bates-Diop, and maybe we'll get to see a little more of him now on back-to-back. So, I guess we'll see how that goes. It's gonna be a rough go for the rest of the season.
Yeah, or even like this weekend coming up, just because like we mentioned, we already know for sure against New Orleans on Saturday that all their core rotation players are out again. The guys that all the 5 players who are out who had a miss. So again, even these even like that game against OKC, the fact that they could have won it, they were just right there. It might hurt them down the road, even though we know that this team was already down so many players. So let's go to now. Let's go ahead and shift over to talking about the last topic here, which is that game against OKC. And again, we don't want to spend too much time on this or go too deep into the analysis because it was the Spurs' first game after multiple days of not playing basketball at all. Being stuck in quarantine, they only got I think 2 practices in, and then and then also as far as for the future, these aren't their normal players who you would see like in the playoff setting. Most of these players, a lot of these guys are like the players on the bench unit or even the second bench unit who got some minutes. So let's just do a quick little recap, and then I'm gonna ask Mike some questions about 2 specific players in a bit. So the way this game went down was early on. It was OKC who had the lead. They led by 10 points late in the first quarter. Then the Spurs make a little bit of a comeback, and then by the third quarter, early on in the third quarter, the Spurs actually take an 11-point lead. So both teams led by double digits in this one. The Thunder fight back as well, and then the Spurs make a little run there in the fourth. But we're going now to the last 30 seconds of the game. It's the Spurs ball. Game's tied at 99 with 10.7 seconds left. They inbound. Patty Mills gets the ball, off the wing, and he's trying to go by one of the Thunder defenders, but he accidentally double dribbles, so he gets called for a turnover there. Then on the next possession, again, tied game with 3.9 seconds left. The Thunder inbound the ball to Al Horford. Jakob Poeltl tries to he's playing denial defense, but instead he kind of almost looks like he's trying to go for the steal. But now because of that, Horford, since he doesn't get the steal, basically, Horford's able to kind of wrap around and have the edge in terms of beating Jakob toward the basket, which is the paint's wide open at this point, which could be a point blank layup for Horford. So Patty Mills is the help defender guarding Lou Dort in the corner. Patty Mills kind of helps out. He has to try to protect the rim, and so Jakob is is also with Horford as well. And so what does that do? That leaves Horford the pass to make to the corner to Lou Dort, who makes a wide open 3, and that's pretty much your ball game. The Spurs lose 102-99. Again, that's been their only game that they've played since the quarantine. DeJounte Murray played really well in his return, 27 points, and then also SGA Shai Gilgeous-Alexander for the Thunder had 42 points, a career high against the Spurs. So Mike, just give me some of your initial thoughts on this game. Try to hold off on your thoughts on Luka, Samanic, and Trey Jones, because I want to talk about them in detail in a bit. But what were some of your thoughts on this game?
Yeah, it's funny. I've seen this kind of situation play out. A lot of times it seems like, and especially down the stretch, it wasn't just one possession where it happened, but a lot of times they'll over dribble or even overpass instead of taking good shots that maybe aren't open, but they've got some space, and instead they'll pass the ball they'll overpass or over dribble into a tougher situation, and that's kind of what was happening with Patty, and he kind of put himself on that sideline. That sideline's it's like the coach will always tell you, that's basically another defender right there. So you're like, that was he had that double dribble, so that was a tough situation. And then, I guess you can break down everything and say, well, maybe Jakob shouldn't have gone for the steal and should have just played him straight up. That's tough. The thing is, Lou Dort was knocking down shots, it seemed like, all game, and then it was too easy a pass for Horford to make. Horford's always been known as a good passing big man, and that pass was too easy. It's almost like the double came a little bit early, and so he had so much time, to be able to, get that pass and shoot it in rhythm and knock it down. It was just like, as soon as he got that pass, I was like, that's going down. If he misses that would be crazy. And it's just a tough situation. They hadn't played in such a long time, so obviously that's why this game is so close. I mean, the Thunder were shorthanded, and the Spurs were probably quite a bit more shorthanded still. So you like to see there were some good things in there. I mean, DeJounte, this guy's confident, so I'm loving seeing that. Seems like it's scoring every game, and he's been able to do a lot more with not just scoring, but also his ability to handle the ball and to distribute and things like that. So I'm really liking what I'm seeing out of that. But yeah, I mean, it was a tough loss, but it's one of those things that you can easily say, okay, well, there's some rust there, and you have 6 players out. That's tough. It was certainly winnable, though.
Yeah, for sure. And that was the thing. You could tell Vegas didn't even know who to pick in this game because initially it was the Thunder favored by 2, and then when the Spurs announced that LaMarcus was going to play, it became Spurs favored by 1. And then as of Coach Pop's press conference, I checked one last time, and it was a pick 'em, which means nobody was really favored in this game. So Vegas was like, this is pretty much 2 even teams at this point with the rosters that they have together. At this point for this game. So yeah, so I mean, I think that again, like I said, just the fact that it was a winnable game still, and the fact that like we mentioned, all these games now where they're either like just barely an underdog or they are favored, they've got to try their best to win these games because like we mentioned, that second half of the schedule is going to be really rough for them, so they got to try to get these wins as best as possible right now, even with the circumstances that they're dealing with the multiple players out due to the health and safety protocols. All right, so Mike, now here are 2 players I really want to speak with you about because, like you mentioned, you record the Forever Turtles podcast each week with John Diaz and Jonas Clark, and so I didn't get to catch a lot of the Austin Spurs games, so but I do see that see the overall numbers, and I see that Luka Samanic, I kept seeing stuff about him on Twitter, and then also from press releases from Samanic and also Trey Jones how well they played, and then Samanic got to start in this game against the Thunder on Wednesday. So his overall score stats here, he finishes with 4 points, both of them coming from the paint, 2 of 3 shooting. He attempted just 1 3, 4 rebounds, 1 foul, and 1 turnover in 19 minutes. And then something interesting was that with the close game in hand against Oklahoma City, Coach Pop went to the players he trusted most, the players with the most experience. And so we saw that with Luka being in only his second year and hasn't played much NBA minutes, he didn't play at all in the fourth quarter. So really all of this action was done in 3 quarters for Luka. His primary matchups in this game were Lou Dort and then also Teo Maledon. And then so since you've been watching him for all those games in the G League bubble, what were your thoughts? Were you is that kind of what you expected? Were you very surprised about something, or was it kind of like an underperformance? What were your thoughts on Luka's game? I think that Coach Pop gave him some praise after the game, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, it was nice to see him get some minutes. I mean, obviously, the start, that's something due to circumstances that he was inserted into the lineup, but I don't expect to see that anytime, soon. I feel like the matchups, those play well in his. Well, normally they play on his favor because one thing I've seen out of him in the G League is he has like a totally different style than I think he'll be able to get away with when he's in the G League. Like when he's been playing for Austin, he plays bully ball. It's like this guy who has taken a lot of ribbing for like his upper body strength or lack thereof, and obviously being more of a finesse type player. Seems like in the bubble, he's just like throwing his body into players and moving players around and able to score, close to the basket. And he's not, he's getting a lot of his points in the paint. And I remember telling John and Jonas, I was like, if he tries to do that like in the NBA, if he tries to do that against like say like a Bam Adebayo or something, Bam's not going to move, right? And he tried to do that, it seemed like with the Al Horford at one point, and it didn't happen. So the Dort and matchups are probably a little better for him. He's got speed and he's got the length there. What I didn't expect a whole lot. I wasn't sure what we were going to see. He's done well in the bubble with Austin, but it's kind of strange because his numbers seem like so crazy, but he's like, I was saying that he's like the new Captain Late or something, because like he'll play, like he'll get nothing going for like 3 quarters, and then he'd come into the fourth quarter and save the day and pull them out of whatever was happening and just like command the ball and get inside and score all these points, and his rebounds get up like 4 rebounds a game compared to last year and things like that. So it's such a strange situation. It's really hard to read because I think that the difference between NBA and G League, at least the way he's been playing, is going to be a lot harder. But I'm also seeing some improvement there. So I'm not like totally on this Luka train that's been going around lately or anything like that. But I like to see that he's at least trying to change his game a little bit more, and so he's definitely going to be one to keep an eye on. I think that unfortunately, that things happened where they needed to call him up, but I think he needed to better served by staying in the bubble, just because for his development, I feel like that was good for him. And so, in fact, we were talking about it earlier. We're both kind of saying that we were all kind of saying that we hope that he and Trey Jones both get back there, like for a playoff push or for the playoffs or something, if they end up qualifying.
Yeah, so I just put up his numbers for the G League when he left. He was averaging 21.8 points, 11 rebounds, and 2 assists a night in 33 minutes. So that's a big part of it. So yeah, and I noticed some of those things. So I wanted to ask you, the Spurs pretty much made him play a 3 in this one game again. Like I said, he guarded Luka Dort, and so I saw him a lot of times either standing on the perimeter. However, I did see him. He wouldn't get the ball because they don't do post-ups anymore. This team, Jakob's lucky if he gets 1 post-up a game. Like I mentioned, LaMarcus is lucky on a normal night if he gets 3, even though he got 7 last night. And I did see Luka continuing to kind of just go in the post, and of course they wouldn't throw him the ball. And so I wanted to ask you, in the G League, was he playing more at the 4 or at the 3 when he was out there?
More 4 for sure.
Okay, so exactly. So it does seem like he was out of position. Again, this is also because the Spurs were limited on a number of players available, so they had to put him at the 3. And Coach Pop, I guess, wanted to see what he could do there at the 3. And so yeah, I could tell that it looked like he was a little uncomfortable in terms of what he was supposed to do on offense. It wasn't really impressive early on in the first quarter when he had one of those nice drives from the basket. I think it was like Trey Lyles or Jakob Poeltl gave him a little dribble handoff, and he kind of just took it and made like a little banker off the window. So yeah, I think that's the hard part about reading G League stats and then translating to NBA. So this is like you go from like 21-11 and then all of a sudden it's like 4 points. It's like if you didn't watch the games of the G League, it's like that's why I wanted to ask you more for the context of this. And so that's why I wanted to get your thoughts. And so yeah, and even actually I do want to say Coach Pop gave him some praise. He gave him, Luka, and Keita Bates-Jobs some praise after the game. He said they both played well. And then now let's talk about the second player, who just came from the G League bubble as well, and that's Trey Jones, the Spurs' rookie. Back in the G League bubble, he was averaging 18 points, 5 rebounds, and 9.7 assists in 31 minutes. Again, keep an eye on those 31 minutes. In this game against the Thunder, he scores 4 points, 2 of 2 field goals, so he made both of his shots. 1 assist, 1 foul, and 1 turnover. And again, he only played 12 minutes. His main matchups were SGA, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and Diallo. So what were your thoughts, Mike, on Jones's play off the bench?
Yeah, I mean, that SGA matchup was a tough one because, SGA was just going off and he was doing it pretty much against anyone, so that's always a tough one. But Trey, I'm liking that pick more and more the more I see him play, because it's kind of crazy because you can put up crazy numbers in college and you can put up some crazy numbers sometimes in G League, but then when you get to the NBA, like you can't fake it all the time, especially. But I think that I think in certain positions you can kind of hide behind like taking a lot of shots to put up big points or doing things like that. Point guard is not a position that you can really fake. Like being a floor general and being able to, trust that player with the ball in his hands is not something you can fake. That's like being a pure point guard, you can't fake it. So the one thing I'm seeing from Trey Jones is he gets the game and he's got like the natural feel for it. And it's one thing that I've seen from him is he's been the one player in the bubble for Austin that I've been probably I guess I've kind of like heaped the most praise on, because he as young as he is, he seems like he's ready to he could be like in a year or two probably starting at point guard somewhere, because he knows what to do with the ball. He doesn't make a lot of rookie mistakes, and he has some tools, aside from being able to distribute, and I feel like he and Luka have worked really well together. And it's funny because as soon as you saw Trey get called up to San Antonio, a lot of other players were having difficulty because they didn't have that guy to find them in their spots and that they were used to. And so with Trey, aside from being that like natural distributor, he's also got speed and he has this like change of pace where it's so quick where he just needs to see a tiny window and he'll like explode to the basket and get a layup, and his shooting seems to be improving. So that's one where it's like, the Spurs already have so many talented young guards, but he's another one, and he may be able to compete sooner rather than later, because everything I've seen from him so far, it's like he's got that like pure point guard tendencies, and he knows what he's doing already.
Yeah, and as far as Trey, I see what I mean. I see some of those points as well. And from what I talk, my biggest takeaway, it's not even a stat thing. It's more like just his composure. He just looks so comfortable out there. Like even though he's only a rookie, like he just looks like he's already been playing in the NBA for like 20 or 30 games now. It's just like when I saw him come off the bench and just kind of running alongside Patty Mills, he's just giving the ball to players where they need it. So I think for Trey, he just looks a lot more comfortable. Than I guess that's what you're saying, Mike. There, especially how you mentioned how some of the Austin players now that he's gone, they're actually struggling, on the offensive end. And I think one of the really cool things about this, just these few games that these players are going to play a lot of minutes, it's just fun to just watch their see what they're doing. It's almost like getting a camera and just putting it on one player instead of watching the whole team. So like what I would do is whenever Luka was in the game on both ends, on offense and defense, I constantly just pay attention to him. How's he guarding his man? How's he doing on help defense? On offense, what is he doing besides just standing in the corner? Is he? And that's what I said. You really notice if you just watch only Luka, you'll notice that he's trying to get into the post, but nobody's going to give him the ball there. And so it's just more interesting. It's almost like, because like we kind of know who the 9-man rotation is, the 10-man rotation when everyone's healthy. But now that these two players, at least for these next, for at least for tomorrow, which is Saturday, against the Pelicans, they're going to pretty much probably get very close to the same type of minutes. So it's going to be interesting again to see how they play. And so it's just like a new little wrinkle in the season just to see these players getting more minutes. And then I agree with you, Mike. I think that maybe there's a chance the Spurs do send them both back if everybody gets healthy and everybody, all the players that are out right now do look like they're healthy again and back at full speed. That'll be something to watch as well for Trey Jones and Luka Samanic. So again, that's just like a little interesting part of the season right now due to the unfortunate circumstance that the team's dealing with health-wise, is that the fact that we get to watch Luka and Trey. Okay, so now before we wrap up this episode, please don't forget to visit projectspurs.com. Steven Anderson is continuing to provide analysis after each game. And then also Benjamin Bornstein's getting ready for the draft coming up with his prospect watches. His latest one is over Corey Kispert, it looks like here. Thanks again to Mike for joining me here on the Spurscast and also for mixing and producing this episode. From all of us at Project Spurs, stay safe and have a great day.